In the vast tapestry of the DC multiverse, heroes and villains are shaped not only by their power, but by the choices they make and the obsessions that consume them. Among the countless adversaries who have clashed with the Flash across time and dimensions, one figure stands above the rest, as both his mirror and his nightmare: Eobard Thawne. His story is not simply that of a villain born in darkness, but of a man whose admiration twisted into envy, whose brilliance was poisoned by obsession, and whose destiny became inextricably bound to his greatest enemy. To understand Thawne is to delve into a tale of genius corrupted by longing, of time unraveled by vengeance, and of a man who sought to redefine himself by destroying the very symbol he once revered. Centuries from now, in the 25th century, Eobard Thawne was not a criminal, nor a soldier, but a scholar, born into a future where the legends of the Justice League had become myth. Thawne grew up idolizing one hero above all others, the Flash, Barry Allen. To him, the Scarlet Speedster was not merely a figure of comic book lore, but an ideal, a beacon of justice and purpose. Thawne dedicated his life to studying the Speed Force, that cosmic energy that allowed the Flash and his successors to run faster than light itself. He was brilliant, perhaps more brilliant than any of his contemporaries, and he discovered what no one else dared believe possible: a way to harness the Speed Force for himself. It was not ambition alone that drove him, but a hunger to step out of the shadow of history and stand beside the legends he worshipped. His experiments were dangerous, obsessive, and lonely. Thawne had no family who understood him, no friends who shared his obsession. What he had was an insatiable drive. After years of work, he succeeded where others had failed. He replicated the accident that gave Barry Allen his powers, striking himself with controlled lightning, bathing in chemical energy, until he emerged reborn as a speedster of the future. The impossible had become real. For a fleeting moment, Thawne believed his destiny had been fulfilled. He would become not just a historian of heroes, but one of them. But the truth was cruel. When Thawne revealed himself to the world, when he wore the crimson suit he designed to mirror Barry's, he expected adoration, recognition, perhaps even acceptance into the pantheon of justice. Instead, he was met with indifference and dismissal. In his time, heroes were only relics of the past, myths to be studied, not resurrected. His efforts were seen not as noble but as pathetic, a man out of step with his era. It was this rejection, this sting of ridicule, that began to fester. Admiration soured into bitterness, and bitterness, given enough time, becomes hate. Still, Thawne pressed on, his obsession with Barry Allen growing ever deeper. He uncovered ancient relics, preserved artifacts of the Flash Museum, and there, for the first time, he discovered the truth about his idol. Through records hidden in history, he learned of Barry's battles, his triumphs, and his death. And then came the revelation that shattered him. He discovered the existence of the Reverse Flash, a figure who would one day become the archenemy of the Flash. And in this dark irony, Eobard Thawne realized the truth that fate had written for him. He was that villain. He was destined not to stand beside his hero, but against him. At first, he rejected it. He told himself the timeline must be wrong, that he could rewrite his role in destiny. But as he delved deeper into the Speed Force and the mysteries of time, he discovered that the more he tried to alter his fate, the more firmly it bound him. Every path he took, every experiment, every journey through time led him back to the same conclusion. Eobard Thawne was the Reverse Flash. Driven to madness by the inevitability of this revelation, Thawne's admiration for Barry warped into a toxic obsession. He began to believe that the only way to define himself, to carve his name into history, was not by becoming the Flash's ally, but by being his eternal shadow. Where Barry was the hero, Thawne would be the villain. Where Barry saved lives, Thawne would end them. Where Barry ran to preserve hope, Thawne would run to extinguish it. He would become the dark reflection of the Flash, a reverse image in every sense. And so, the man who once wanted to be a hero donned the yellow suit, lightning bolts inverted, and embraced the name history had given him. He became the Reverse Flash, the nemesis born across centuries, armed not only with speed, but with a mastery of time itself. Unlike Barry, Thawne could manipulate the timeline, rewriting moments, erasing lives, undoing victories. He discovered that the cruelest weapon was not speed, but inevitability. The power to strike not only at a man, but at his very existence. The first time he traveled back to Barry's era, it was not to kill him but to test him, to see the man behind the legend, and when Thawne looked into Barry Allen's eyes, he did not see the god he had worshipped, but a man flawed, vulnerable, mortal. That discovery only deepened his obsession. If Barry was human, then Thawne could be greater. If Barry was a hero, Thawne would prove himself the ultimate villain. From that moment on, their fates were bound together across centuries. The Flash ran toward justice, the Reverse Flash ran toward vengeance, and neither could ever truly stop the other. Part 1 ends with Thawne stepping into the past for the first time, the yellow and red lightning crackling around him, his laughter echoing across the fabric of time. The man who had once idolized Barry Allen had become his eternal enemy, a figure born not out of darkness but out of twisted love. The Reverse Flash had arrived, and history would never be the same again. The first confrontation between Barry Allen and Eobard Thawne was not an accident, nor was it an impulsive strike from a madman. It was carefully orchestrated by a man who had spent centuries studying every detail of the Flash's life. His victories, his friendships, his weaknesses. Thawne did not rush into battle. He wanted Barry to feel his presence, to sense the growing shadow behind him. Like a predator circling its prey, the Reverse Flash lingered on the edges of the Speed Force, teasing fate before finally unleashing himself into Barry's world. When the two finally clashed, the encounter was unlike anything Barry had faced. This was not just another criminal with speed, not a villain of the week. Thawne wasn't simply fast, he was Barry's equal, his rival, his inverse. Every punch Barry threw, Thawne countered. Every step forward was met with a mirrored step. Backward, it was like fighting his own reflection, but darker, sharper, more vicious. And as the battle raged across Central City, Barry realized that Thawne was not merely trying to defeat him. He was taunting him, drawing him into a dance that spanned not just space, but time itself. For Thawne, every encounter was personal. He reveled in tormenting Barry, whispering truths that no other villain could know. He knew about Barry's future, about his triumphs and his failures. He knew about Iris, about the fragile balance of Barry's life, and he used that knowledge like a dagger. Each strike was not just physical, it was emotional, psychological. Barry was fighting not only a speedster, but a man who knew the shape of his destiny, who claimed to have walked through every moment of his life and twisted it to his own will. And then came the cruelty that defined the Reverse Flash. Unlike most villains, Thawne did not seek immediate victory. He sought to break Barry Allen piece by piece, to make him feel powerless against the inevitable tide of time. He meddled with the past, altering small events to prove his dominance. A forgotten day would vanish. A cherished memory would twist into something darker. Friends would act strangely, as if nudged by unseen hands. Thawne's message was clear. I am not just your enemy in the present, I'm the shadow across your entire life. The most devastating strike came when Thawne crossed the final line. He killed Iris West, in the middle of a wedding. In what should have been a moment of love and joy, the Reverse Flash appeared. He did not come to rob, nor to conquer. He came to take from Barry the one thing that made him whole. With the cruel smirk of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, Thawne ended Iris's life in front of Barry's eyes, and in that moment, he proved that the greatest power was not speed, but control over fate itself. Barry's world collapsed, and Thawne laughed as the man he once idolized crumbled under the weight of his loss. It was not the only time Thawne would strike at Barry's heart. Again and again, across timelines and realities, he returned to inflict pain. He killed Barry's mother, Nora Allen, setting into motion the chain of events that would one day transform Barry into the Flash. He toyed with the very origin of his enemy, rewriting the past so that Barry's life was born from tragedy, making himself the author of the Flash's destiny. In doing so, he achieved the ultimate form of cruelty. Barry Allen existed, not in spite of him, but because of him. Every step Barry ran, every victory he claimed, was a twisted echo of Thawne's manipulation. This was the essence of the He was not simply a villain to be defeated in battle. He was the ghost in Barry's timeline, the eternal hand pulling strings in the shadows, the reminder that no matter how fast the Flash ran, he could never truly outrun him. For every life Barry saved, Thawne was there to take another. For every triumph, there was a tragedy carefully crafted by his enemy. The Reverse Flash had become more than a man. He had become inevitability. As their rivalry deepened, the battles escalated into cataclysmic wars that shook not only Central City, but the timeline itself. Whole realities trembled under their conflict. The Speed Force screamed as the two raced across centuries, colliding in moments that should never have existed. For Barry, it was a desperate struggle to hold on to his humanity, to keep running, not just for justice, but to preserve the fragile lives around him. For Thawne, it was pure ecstasy. Every moment of suffering he caused was proof that his existence mattered, that his shadow would always stretch further than Barry's light. The man who once dreamed of standing beside his idol had now committed to haunting him forever. Eobard Thawne was no longer a scholar, nor a fan, nor a man chasing destiny. He was the Reverse Flash, the eternal rival, the dark truth that every hero must face. And in his laughter, in the crackling yellow lightning that scorched the earth, wherever he ran, the world came to understand a terrifying truth. The Flash may be the fastest man alive, but no one runs faster than death. Time had always been Eobard Thawne's playground, but it was also his prison. The Reverse Flash existed in a paradox, his entire life defined by Barry Allen, the very hero he worshipped, envied, and hated. His obsession had transformed into purpose, and his purpose had twisted into a war that stretched across centuries. Unlike other villains who fought for power, wealth, or conquest, Thawne fought for something far darker, to rewrite his identity by destroying Barry Allen's. Every encounter between the Flash and the Reverse Flash was more than a battle of speed, it was a battle of legacies. To the world, Barry was the Scarlet Speedster, a beacon of hope. To Thawne, Barry was a thief. He had stolen Thawne's rightful destiny, the glory he believed was meant to be his. And so, Thawne dedicated his every moment to proving that Barry Allen's life and everything he stood for could be dismantled. But Thawne didn't fight like ordinary men. His mastery of the negative Speed Force, the crimson counterpart to Barry's gift, allowed him to move through time itself. Unlike the Speed Force, which connected and empowered generations of heroes, the negative Speed Force corrupted and consumed. With every step, Thawne poisoned time, leaving behind echoes of himself, fragments that could stalk Barry through past, present, and future. This was what made Thawne different from any other adversary. He wasn't bound by linear existence. When Barry defeated him in one era, Thawne returned from another. He was a ghost, a shadow cast across the entire timeline, forever chasing, forever tormenting. The Reverse Flash didn't need to win once, he needed to win endlessly, eroding Barry's will piece by piece. One of Thawne's cruelest weapons wasn't his speed, but his knowledge. He knew Barry Allen more intimately than perhaps Barry knew himself. He knew his friends, his family, his triumphs, and his tragedies because Thawne had studied them from the future, dissecting every detail of the Flash's existence like a scholar obsessed with a single manuscript. And he used that knowledge to strike at Barry where it hurt the most, in one timeline. Thawne murdered Barry's wife, Iris West, during what should have been a celebration of love. In another, he threatened to erase Wally West, Barry's nephew and successor, from ever existing. Thawne understood that to truly defeat a hero, you didn't simply kill them. You broke their spirit. You turned their victories into ashes. For Barry Allen, fighting the Reverse Flash wasn't just a matter of stopping a villain, it was about resisting despair itself. Every time he saved the world, Thawne reminded him that his greatest enemy wasn't a stranger, but a reflection of his own power, twisted by obsession. Every victory against Thawne was temporary, for the villain could always return from another point in history, carrying the hatred of countless lifetimes, and Thawne relished it. For him, pain was not a side effect of battle, it was the goal. He wanted Barry to suffer, to question the worth of being a hero, to doubt whether his sacrifices truly mattered. In Thawne's eyes, this was justice. Barry had stolen his destiny, and so Thawne would steal everything Barry loved. Over and over again, their conflict came to symbolize something greater, the eternal struggle between hope and obsession, light and shadow. Barry Allen ran to save lives, to honor the gift he had been given. Eobard Thawne ran not to save, but to destroy, to corrupt the very idea of what it meant to be a hero. Where Barry saw time as a river to protect, Thawne saw it as clay to shape. With cruelty, yet in the midst of this endless war, something undeniable emerged, a bond, twisted and poisoned, but a bond nonetheless. Thawne was not merely Barry's enemy, he was his dark mirror, inseparable from the Flash's journey. Without Barry, there would be no revenge, and without Thawne, Barry would never understand the true weight of his own legacy. The battles raged across realities, in Central City, in alternate Earths, in the very Speed Force itself. Each time, the Flash proved resilient. Each time, Thawne returned, more determined, more hateful, more dangerous. For unlike other villains, Eobard Thawne was never after the world. He was after Barry Allen's soul. And as the wars of speed echoed across the multiverse, one truth became clear. This was a rivalry without end. The Flash ran for hope. The Reverse Flash ran for vengeance. And together, they wrote an eternal story of pursuit, a cycle of creation and destruction that neither could escape. For Eobard Thawne, victory was not measured in a single battle. Victory was in the torment, in the chase, in the unbreakable fact that no matter where Barry Allen ran, no matter how fast, no matter how far, the Reverse Flash would always be there. He was not just a villain, he was inevitability. Eobard Thawne was not meant to exist, and yet, he always would. That was the cruel paradox of the Reverse Flash. He was a shadow born from the future, yet his every action rewrote the past. He was a man consumed by obsession, but that obsession granted him immortality across the timeline. No matter how many times he was defeated, erased, or even killed, the negative Speed Force ensured his return. He was not just Eobard Thawne anymore, he was the embodiment of hatred itself. The paradox defined him. In some futures, Barry Allen killed him. In others, Thawne killed Barry. But regardless of the outcome, Thawne's existence echoed. Time itself bent to accommodate him, as though the universe had accepted that the rivalry between the Flash and the Reverse Flash was eternal. Their struggle had become a fixed point in the multiverse, unchangeable, inevitable, and that inevitability became Thawne's greatest weapon. Heroes could defeat him, but they could never erase him. Even when Barry thought the nightmare was over, Thawne always returned, laughing, faster, crueler than before. His legacy was not measured in cities conquered or worlds destroyed, but in lives scarred. Every Flash, Barry, Wally, even those from other worlds carried the mark of Eobard Thawne. He was the speedster who would never let them rest. But what made Thawne truly terrifying was that his hatred was eternal, yet deeply personal. Unlike cosmic threats who sought to end reality, Thawne's war was intimate. He didn't want the end of the world. He wanted Barry Allen to suffer endlessly. That singular obsession allowed him to transcend even death. In one infamous act, Thawne reached back into Barry's childhood. With the power of the negative Speed Force, he struck at the very foundation of Barry's life. He murdered Nora Allen, Barry's mother, and framed his father for the crime. This single act reshaped the Flash's destiny forever, forging the path of tragedy and heroism that would define him. And for Thawne, this was the ultimate victory. Every step Barry took, as the Flash was now born from Thawne's cruelty, Eobard had rewritten the very origin of his enemy. This act revealed the deepest layer of Thawne's psyche. His obsession wasn't only to destroy Barry, but to prove that, even Barry's greatest strength, his heroism was the product of Thawne's hatred. In Thawne's twisted mind, this meant that Barry could never escape him, that every good deed, every life saved, every victory the Flash ever achieved, all of it was thanks to Eobard Thawne. And so, the cycle continued. Barry fought for hope. Thawne fought to corrupt that hope. The world saw the Flash as a hero, but in Thawne's eyes, the Flash was a monument built on his torment. It was a war not just of speed, but of philosophy, destiny versus obsession, light versus shadow. Yet even as he reveled in his cruelty, Thawne could never escape the truth. Without Barry Allen, he was nothing. He existed only in opposition. His legacy was tied to the very man he hated most, and in some twisted way, that gave his life meaning. He had become the villain who could never die, because his story was inseparable from the hero's. The Reverse Flash was not a conqueror of worlds. He was not a god or a demon. He was something more terrifying: inevitability. In every timeline, in every universe, wherever there was a Flash, there would always be a Reverse Flash. And so, the legacy of Eobard Thawne endures, not in monuments or kingdoms, but in whispers of fear, in the red streak of lightning that appears when hope shines brightest. He is the shadow at the edge of every victory, the reminder that no matter how fast the hero runs, darkness will always follow. For Barry, Allen, and all who would carry the mantle of the Flash, this truth could never be outrun. The Reverse Flash is forever,